All right there. How's it going, Worldview Seminar class? I hope you guys are doing okay. This recording is coming to you. Actually, I'm doing it Sunday evening. It's a little later tonight than normal, but it's been a full day of stuff. So you'll be watching this for Monday, April 20th, which is our last week of scheduled class for the semester. So as always, I hope you guys are doing well, and I hope you're healthy, and you and your families can both say that. Say both things, I should say. Just a reminder. So I think most of you have probably seen the message come through via the Converge announcements feature. But I posted a final exam study guide to Converge, and so that's been there since Friday, actually. So you've got some time, but the final exam is a week from the 20th. So the final exam will be on Monday, the 27th. And I'll be posting some more specific instructions, but you'll be taking that exam independently. I'll be talking about my honors system and my expectations as far as that's concerned. And I'll give you a few more guidelines. It'll be very straightforward. There will be an open time for the exam where I'll have it posted on the Converge resource page for an amount of time, and you guys will have the ability to access it and then type out your responses in a Microsoft Word document, and then attach that document to an email that you send to me. So that's just real quickly. I'll be a little bit more specific when I post some instructions on Converge, though, okay? As always, I mean, I probably told you guys this ad nauseum. Maybe some of you are sick of me saying it, but man, I miss being in class. I miss seeing my students, and I'm an introvert, so my Myers-Briggs personality is INTJ, and so I'm definitely a much more introverted personality, and yet I just, I find myself getting a little bit cooped up here. It's not too bad, but I enjoy being at my house, of course, but I'm a teacher. I'm meant to be around students, and this is a little hard for me. I'm doing my best. I hope you guys understand that I'm doing what I can to make this as as approachable and as instructive and helpful as I can. But I really do miss seeing you guys. I miss actually having the opportunity to be in a classroom with you. So I hope we all can look back on this at some point and have a chuckle, perhaps, that we all made it through okay, and our loved ones did, and that that it's in the rearview mirror, and we're back to a world where we get to be together and be together in Christian community on our campus. So that's my hope, and until that time, keep your spirits high and think optimistically about where we'll hopefully be with this in a few more weeks or months, and know that of course the Lord is sovereign. Okay, let me see now. We're going to talk for a little bit today and also on Wednesday about postmodernism. Oh, I almost forgot. So I'm sorry, just backtrack a minute. Remember, you guys all have to have at least read Brave New World by Friday. For those of you who already did the responses to Albert Camus' book, The Plague, that's all you have to do, read Aldous Huxley's book. But for those of you who did not do the responses for Camus' book, that means that you need to do the responses for Brave New World. Those are posted on the Converge resources, general resources component on that page, so you have access to those. Make sure that those are done by Friday and submit those to me. And then on Friday, actually during the Zoom lecture that I prep and post for Friday, I'll be walking you guys through some key themes from the novel. Okay, there we go. So back to our postmodernism. And let's actually go here for a moment. So this is a repeat of a slide you guys have seen. This is nothing new. This this will bring back some memories for you from, ages past when we were actually in a physical classroom together. So nothing that will surprise you here. I have shown this Postmodernism 101 slide before. FYI, just while I'm thinking of it, I did look for another one of those Patheos Philosophical Library posts for postmodernism, and they had a couple of articles there that were okay. I instead went with, I think, a much more helpful piece from a gentleman named D.A. Carson, dealing with the impact of postmodernism on many Christians here in the 21st century. So I posted that on our Converge page. We really would like you to pour through that. It's not terribly long, but it's a little bit of reading. Since we haven't had a text here that we're reading in the second half of the semester, I think you can probably handle a little bit of reading. Probably take you, 15 minutes tops to pour through it. It's not all that long, but it'll take you a little bit of time. And I like how Professor Carson walks his reader through some of the key things that he sees Christians, especially Christian young people, working through when it comes to postmodernism here in the early 21st century. So please go through and do that. Coming back to our slide here, these are, I like to compare the postmodern perspective with the pre-modern and sometimes what's called the modern view, because of the fact that as different as those views may have been, the fact of the matter is that they actually did believe in something very critical, and that is the reality, the belief in an objective truth, an objective reality outside of the human self, and also that there is this shared view between pre-moderns and sometimes what are called moderns, with the notion that there is an objective, not only reality, but that objective universal truth that is binding on all human beings at any one time, or in fact, in many cases at all times, that these universal objective truths also existed. And the goal was then to identify them, so that there was actually reality. Human beings could discover, as you see in the portion there under shared assumptions, human beings were meant to learn how to discover reality and to align themselves with it, and that there were a number of responsibilities for human beings who were living in accordance with not only reality of the world, of nature's laws, but also for Christians, the idea, of course, that in that universal, objective, truthful reality, we have the requirement to align ourselves with not only the reality, but also with the will of our Creator. Cast that against what we now know as the postmodern view, and I want to acknowledge that postmodernism is a many-tiered subject, and so it gets pretty complex. There are at least a dozen and a half or more, 24 or more strains of postmodernism, so structuralism would be one of these things that falls under the larger umbrella of postmodernism. So I just want you to be aware that this is not a very simplistic subject matter. It's actually rather broad, and we're just trying to get a snapshot, something that will help us understand some things. So the postmodern perspective, of course, is going completely in the opposite direction and suggesting that there is no universal objective truth outside of the self. People are independent. They are these autonomous beings. And sorry, I'm looking down at my 19-year-old kitty. Hey, kitty. No, sorry, here she is. There. Meet Misty, the very, very old cat. She's going to be 19 in about a week. So say hi, Misty, honey. She's not happy with me right now. That is a universal objective truth. My cat is not at all happy with me at this moment. All right, go on. There you go. Good kitty. So the universal, the idea of universal objective truth is certainly in the past, as far as postmoderns are concerned, they're not convinced that there is any such thing. And the belief is that we are all, that human beings are each these independent entities allowed to determine not only truth, but even reality for themselves. Which, as you see at the bottom of the screen, the resulting worldview is that there, if you make that assumption that there is no universal objective reality, then there are consequences from that, including, foundations for judging. So I've showed you these Calvin and Hobbes before. I love how Waterston was able to bring some of these concepts to the forefront very effectively. I've got to put my reading glasses on here. So I love the one in the upper left-hand corner as it concludes, talking about concepts of tolerance. In order to improve oneself, one must have some idea of what's good. That implies certain values, says Calvin. But as we all know, values are relative, he says. Every system of belief is equally valid, and we need to tolerate diversity. Virtue isn't better than vice, it's just different. Now, that's such a thoroughgoing postmodern argument, and of course, his counterpart, Hobbes, begins to ask him the most logical questions. And it proceeds from there. The next one where Calvin is talking about the dog-eat-dog world. He'll do whatever he has to and let others argue about whether it's right or not. And in other words, who's to say what's right? Everybody gets to determine. And then Hobbes, of course, shoves him to the ground. Calvin responds as any normal human being would. Why would you do that? Why did you do that? And Hobbes says, well, you were in the way. Now you're not. The ends justify the means. And of course, Calvin responds again, as any reasonable human being who's actually living human life probably would. Well, I didn't mean for everyone, you dolt, just for me. Ah, of course. And you see these different comic representations here. These are perfectly in line with a postmodern line of questioning, and I love that the Calvin character is, as a young boy, is bringing these to the forefront. But of course, we're aware that this whole approach to life is everywhere around us. The questioning of objective certainty, the questioning of whether or not moral laws are to be thought of in a universal sense, or whether in fact it is much more subjective than that. Whether laws themselves, whether those laws are drawn from some sort of a universal objective law maker, or whether they are social constructs, right? This is one of the big points, one of the big question marks of the modern era that we're hearing an awful lot of the time. All of these fall within the realm of postmodernism. So you guys have, when we read through the Sire book, he walked you through a lot of the scenarios. He set these things up very well. It's another reason I really love using that book. So here we are at this point, and I wanted you guys to have some exposure to some ways in which postmodernism kind of leaks through into pop culture. And not surprisingly, again, I think it's helpful for us to wade into the realm of filmmaking. And so you guys have been watching some movies, and we've got a group so the group that would have, gone on the subject together, they're all now, of course, as you guys have all been doing, they're producing their own individual videos on Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So thoroughly postmodern, thoroughly hilarious, but definitely thoroughly postmodern film in the ways that it represents all sorts of, in this case, all sorts of the Arthurian legend, and brings that whole concept to the forefront, not only in a very humorous manner at times, but also as an outrageously subjective orientation. So looking forward to what our various group members have to say about the Monty Python film. But there are a couple of other films that I wanted you to be aware of, and I just want to walk you through a couple of them for this particular class session. So the first one is one of the all-time great films, and I'm not going to talk at length about every aspect of the film, but it's one that I think you guys should be aware of. If you haven't seen it or you haven't watched it for this class, it's probably a film that you should watch at some point if you're able to handle a little bit of mafia or gangster violence here and there. And it's the film The Godfather, which came out in 1972, made by Francis Ford Coppola and famously starring Marlon Brando in the title role as Don Vito Corleone, and Al Pacino starring as his son Michael, and the cast of the film, just a wonderful cast of actors and actresses in the film. I'm not going to go through every last one of them right now. Talia Shire plays in the film, very young Talia Shire, who goes on to play Adrian in the Rocky films. And so The Godfather, what I wanted you to see about this film, first and foremost, the postmodern subjective part of all this is that, of course, we would understand that through a Christian lens, that a mafia family, so a crime organization or a crime family, like the Corleones, who oversee all sorts of nefarious activities, right? Let's be clear on what gangsters, what mobsters, past and present, oversee. They oversee a lot of illegal businesses. So a lot of gambling, prostitution, drug trafficking. These are the things that the mafia has always overseen. And these activities obviously are not only negative, they are illegal. They cause a great deal of harm, not only to the individual, but to the families of individuals who are caught up in these realities. Many, in fact, virtually all of the crime families, past and present, of course, enforce their quote unquote businesses with violence, often with death and execution. So those are realities. The film The Godfather, which is, by the way, this is a reminder that you can't associate the filmmaker with the worldview sometimes. So Francis Ford Coppola actually is a devout Catholic, okay, something you should know. But he constructs his film based on the Mario Puzo novel. He constructs his film in a very postmodern sense, a very subjective sense, because we are witnessing the entire story from the inside out. It's almost as if we, as the audience members, are adoptive or adopted members of the Corleone crime family. And so we are brought in alongside as Don Corleone makes his decisions, and we interact with Sonny and with Michael and with Fredo and the other members of the family in this sense. And we are meant to be brought alongside, experiencing life in the late 1940s as the Corleones are coming out of the Americans are coming out of World War II, getting back to normalcy in life. And we see how this particular family relates to other crime families, and how the Corleones try to get the upper hand in relations with other crime families in New York and in Atlantic City and other parts of the East Coast and the Midwest. And it's really it's a genius approach, but it's also very disturbing, because as you get through the film and you're sitting there after having watched it, you're actually feeling as if, well, the legacy of Don Corleone, what a great man he was, in a sense. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of the story. You're meant to feel the losses of the members of the Corleone family when they suffer, or if they are injured, or if they are killed. You are meant to feel a real sense of remorse for them because of this reality where you are meant to kind of live through the experiences with them and have this much more compassionate approach to what is happening in these stories. So, you know, the violence in the film is all, so the relationships in the films, part of them, you know, they seem so normal, like, you know, the interactions with Don Corleone and his children and his grandchildren seem so loving. Uh, the facade of the mafia relationship to the Catholic Church, obviously severe miscomprehension of what uh, Catholic Christianity is supposed to mean for somebody who actually believes, and yet there are some strange and powerful associations between the mafia and the Catholic Church. There there are rationales for why murders take place. The rationale that we hear the most in that film is that you know, it's not personal, it's business, right? Uh, you hear that line several times in the film. So you have these strange, seeming, you know, very normal looking aspects of human relationships between family members and friends, marriages, right? So wedding ceremonies, baptisms, gathering together for suppers, all of those things, of course, juxtaposed, cast against these surreal realities of gangland life. And then it's all kind of mixed together, as I said. All of this creates a radically subjective foundation through which the story may be told. So this is let me jump back over here. This is a critical component of The Godfather. So I posted a clip from the very beginning. It's the opening scene of the film where this mortician comes in and tells Don Corleone this frightful story about how his daughter was nearly raped but defended her honor, and instead of being raped, she was beaten to within an inch of her life by these two young men. And this mortician tells the Godfather he wants justice. He wants the Godfather essentially to find these two young guys and kill them. And this is the opening sequence of the film, and you're introduced to the concept of so-called justice through the lens of the Corleone family, specifically through the lens of the Godfather. It's a very solid introduction to this very strange subjective environment that I just talked about. Okay, let's see. The other film, I posted two other ones as well, so I want you to be aware of them. The one that I want to talk about just briefly is a film called Big Fish. It's a Tim Burton film, and it's really about it's a very engaging film, to be honest with you, but it's definitely a thoroughly postmodern film. So it ostensibly tells the life of this young man who's played by Ewan McGregor in the film, and you see his life told through his own fantastical memories. And the idea becomes that his son, later in life, when he's an old man, his son is now coming to tend to him in his old age, and as he nears death, and this son is very upset by what he believes are just fictions, lies, as far as his father's life is concerned. And, you know, as the story is projected, right, as it's told, we're meant to, along with the son, we're meant to begin to assume that, well, hey, how does anyone define reality? How does anyone really define truth? Aren't these warped memories that are elaborated, that are exaggerated, aren't those just fine? Those aren't lies. Those are just the ways in which these memories, are told and shared with people, and what's the harm in that, essentially. And so you get to the end of the film in this famous, closing of life sequence, and I'll let you watch that clip. It's a very interesting film, but it's thoroughly postmodern. Okay, two more films. The Matrix. Not a shocker here. So The Matrix there are some other worldviews that rear their heads in the film, obviously, kind of like we would say with secular humanism. Many of you, so the group did Life of Pi. I talked about this previously. The Life of Pi actually integrates a few other worldviews, but it's thoroughly founded in a secular humanist worldview. I would say the same with The Matrix. You see some elements of Eastern pantheism, certainly present in the film, absolutely true. You see a little bit of secular humanism in there too, actually sprinkled here and there. But the film most foundationally is a postmodern film. And there's no better, no better sequence that brings that to light than when Morpheus is talking to Neo. So Morpheus, played by Lawrence Fishburne, and Neo, played by the great Keanu Reeves. Whoa, right? That was the upper echelon, the upper limit of Keanu Reeves' early acting abilities. Thankfully, he's morphed beyond that. Now he's actually capable of kind of poking fun at himself, as he did in Toy Story 4 when he played the stunt man, and he kept saying, yes, I Canada. Anyway, yes, I Canada, right? Really fun. Love Toy Story 4. Very, very fun movie. So Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, his character Neo is saved from the real world and brought into this ship, this vessel that Morpheus and his crew fly around in, and he's introduced to reality as he's told. And he's brought into this computer program where Morpheus talks to him about, what is real? What does that mean? That's a great foundation for the rest of the film, actually, as we are constantly struggling between what we may believe reality was or is versus what we should make it to be, or what it really actually should be. And Neo struggles against this throughout the remainder of the film. And one of the major juxtapositions is that the computer generated reality is, in a number of respects, the better reality to want to live in. Even one of the other characters who kind of becomes the Judas in the film and brings the computer sentinels in against his former crewmates, even he says, he'd rather live in the Matrix and believe something false because it's a lot better. He'd rather live in a world where he gets to eat steak and drink wine and be happy. So, all of these perspectives are circulating around in The Matrix, and they're just so thoroughly postmodern. They're very effectively constructed, and they're woven expertly into the film by the Wachowski brothers. So, thoroughly enjoyable film. Definitely one of the more innovative and exciting films of the very last year of the 20th century. So it came out in 1999, and all sorts of applications from it. So that is one of the other ones that I posted. Yeah, I'll do one last one here. So I posted a clip from The Dark Knight, and here's my caveat. You guys, if you watched The Dark Knight, it was included under the list for Kierkegaardian ethics, and for very good reason. It is so thoroughly intertwined with those Kierkegaardian notions of existentialism. So existentialism is Kierkegaardian existentialism. Even some secular components of existentialism are at the heart and core of that film. But there are some other elements too, and postmodernism is such a critical part of it. So as Brian Godawa has observed, the closing, there are a couple of sequences in that film that really speak to this. First and foremost, the moral universe of the Batman, or the moral universe of the Dark Knight, is ambiguous, right? So obviously, we're meant to obviously connect evil with the Joker. Joker is not a good guy. The Joker is manipulative. He's an absolutely horrid, psychotic, even criminal. And his plans, if they come to fruition, his plans can deeply maim, if not kill, hundreds and thousands of people. Just kind of depends on how those plans shape out and go. So obviously, we're meant to have, we're meant to have that association with the Joker. But the other two characters in the film that are more ambiguous, that are more difficult to grapple with, are really interesting postmodern frameworks. The first of which is Harvey Dent, the character who ultimately is horribly maimed in an explosion after being burned and becomes the villain Two-Face. So the Harvey Dent character, who is perceived as this impregnable good guy, somebody who is going to be a bulwark of truth, a bulwark of ethics, goodness, a bright light for the people of Gotham, someone who is assumed to be, unassailable when it came to the terrors of the world. And yet, even Harvey Dent falls. Harvey Dent gives himself over in his grief and in his wounded state. He gives himself over to his new self. His real self, in a sense, is what we're kind of suspecting he's talked himself into. Certainly the Joker has talked him into believing it. Also, of course, Bruce Wayne, who we know is Batman. What has Bruce Wayne done in the film? Well, Bruce Wayne has, he's not often pursuing legitimate forms of justice. He's often engaged in some form of arguably vengeance, and he's certainly superseded the laws of the land. He's certainly superseded thus genuine justice. He goes over to Hong Kong to retrieve a subject illegally. He asks one of his friends to illegally wiretap all of the citizens of Gotham, even though that act is ultimately ceased, at least as far as we know. Even though that act doesn't last long, it is still a very dangerous exhibit of authority, power. So what has Batman become in the film? He tortures a suspect, happens to be the Joker. Batman beats him till he's he's screaming crazily, as the Joker does. So Batman has done a lot of things in the film that are questionable, and we're kind of coming along for the ride in this process. And then in the last part of the film, one of the last speeches that we hear coming from Batman, as he's talking to James Gordon at the tail end of the movie, they decide that they're not going to let the world know. They're not going to let Gothamites know about what really happened. They're not going to let them know that Harvey Dent was committing murders as the Two-Face. They're not going to let them know that Harvey Dent threatened Gordon's own family. They're going to instead hide that from the people of Gotham and claim that it was the Batman who committed all of these illegal acts and all of these murders, and that in the end it was the Batman who in fact killed Harvey Dent, brutally murdered him. And the argument is this. The argument that Batman gives is that, look, sometimes the people need to be rewarded for their faith. So there's the leap of faith component, again, hearkening to the Kierkegaardian thing. But it's more than that, because he says, look, sometimes it's not what is actually true, but what people believe in that's important. And they need to still believe in that beacon of light that was Harvey Dent, and the Dent Act that is going to be put into as a piece of legislation that is going to enable all sorts of meaningful capacity for the battle against crime in Gotham City. So essentially the argument becomes that what is real goodness can't be revealed, which is to say the sacrifices made by Batman, made by Alfred, made by James Gordon and other legitimate ethical police officers, none of that can be revealed to the people of Gotham because the belief is they can't handle it. And what they need is a fiction. What they need is something that is pretend to help them get by. So they don't need actual goodness, they need merely a story of goodness. And that story is somehow more important and more powerful in this thoroughly subjective postmodern world. It is a really interesting but thoroughly postmodern framework that the film The Dark Knight ends on. Very subtly done. So this is not something I would expect the average person to recognize watching the film, but once you guys think this through, especially given how we've covered philosophies this semester, I think you'll see it's a very interesting postmodern construct. And it's not the only philosophy in the film, but I think it's a fascinating moment in The Dark Knight when postmodernism really comes to the forefront. Okay, guys, that's it for right now. I'm going to post another postmodernism element for Wednesday, the 22nd. But until then, I think we should be good to go. And I, again, hope you're doing really well. See ya.